my mom paid the doctor $100. He gave my biological father 35 bucks. And for that small amount of money, my entire identity was just erased.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I'm your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for not parent expected or non-paternal event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out.
Hi, Cassandra.
Hi, Lily. Thank you so much for having me on here.
Thank you for dealing with me and the sound issues today. You've been
Thank
so
you for your patience. Thank you for your patience. My goodness.
this is going to work. You don't have a delay and I can hear you and we're just going to keep going.
Okay, good.
Okay. So, like I was saying earlier, and I may be wrong because I've done 64 episodes, but I believe you are my first official donor conceived story.
Wow.
Actually, I'm not using the proper term, am I? I believe I've just recently learned I should say, is it assisted conception? Do you prefer that?
There are so many different terms, and I don't know if there's a consensus among us what we prefer. A lot of people don't like the term donor conceived because the word donor is really a misnomer. Especially in the United States, they're paid. They're not really donating anything, and also the term in itself, even if it is an altruistic donation without payment, it really dehumanizes that part of us. So there is a feeling amongst our community that that's not really the right word for us. But a lot of us do identify as donor conceived people because it's what's understood currently. So there is a lot of talk about trying to find a better term, whether it be, like you said, assisted reproductive technology, so assisted reproduction, or preconception adoption is another one I've heard, to kind of illustrate kind of how the separation is done preconception, but it's transactional like an adoption is. So yeah, there are a lot of terms and a lot of ethical discussions around what would be the best term for us. But yeah, currently in this country, donor conceived people is kind of what we've used to congregate, to kind of make a community for ourselves and to identify each other as, by the method of our conception.
Okay, and so is that when I see the acronym DCP, does that mean donor conceived peoples?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. I had someone ask me if I was going to have a DCP on my podcast soon, and I kind of guessed on that one, but now this makes sense. And yeah, and what you just said, I just have to repeat it because this was new to me a few months ago. Donor conceived is not it's not necessarily the right term because although it can happen, these are not eggs and sperm are not donated. Not usually. This is a paid this was a transaction of some sort, usually.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Just hard to wrap my brain around. And you correct me today with the things I say wrong. I'm still trying to educate myself on this, but in children's rights and all of this, along with assisted reproduction. But
Thank you.
Thank you for being willing to talk about this today.
Oh, absolutely. It adds another ethical layer onto the NPE already what goes on with NPEs and the feelings behind it. It really adds this other layer of discussion to it that a lot of NPEs don't understand, and it's more akin to adoption. So that aspect of our stories generally we can discuss more openly with adoptees.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. And that is another yeah, that's another group of people that I hope to hear more from more voices as well on this podcast. Do you remember though that the first time we were introduced to each other or how we met was we were both on the same documentary, the NBC New York web documentary from I don't know, it might have been 2020, early
Yeah,
2020.
it was. I believe it was February, I think, because I remember telling Paisley that we had our Christmas tree up until my daughter's birthday, which was at the end of February. And so yeah, I think it was like right before the pandemic hit. And I think I emailed her, a few weeks after it came out just to thank her again and say, wow, you really did that at the right time, because had it been a few weeks later, all we heard about was COVID-19, you know?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like that came out, and then all of a sudden the news was just overwhelmed with COVID. And I'm going to put
Yeah.
a link to the documentary that web documentary that you were on. I was on. Someone else was on. I forget her name right now.
Yeah, my friend Amber is also donor conceived, and
That was
yeah,
it.
she's fantastic. And yes, and when I saw that there was another person, and I didn't recognize her immediately, I was like, wait, I have to find out who this person is. And then when I saw that you did the podcast, and you just looked like such a wonderful person, and I was just so thrilled to connect with you.
Oh, same. I'm so glad I've connected with you. For people listening, they're going to recognize Cassandra if you are on any of the online forums. I've seen you in webinars. You are on podcasts. I've seen you do guest blog posts and you're writing about it. And you're just very active with the NPE and the DCP community. And you just know a lot. You know so much more than I do ethically about all of this. But I wanted to give you, we have less than an hour. So I want to give you the space today. I just want to hear your story and anything you want to share about today. So we are recording, but I don't really know your full background other than what I saw in the documentary about you. So if you could kind of start at the beginning and take it any way you want to and feel comfortable with.
Absolutely. So, growing up, my mother is first generation Italian American, um, and my dad is super American. Very, very long history in America. That's what Italians would call American. Just really, really American. His family tree descended from early colonial settlers, the early Dutch settlers of New York when it was New Amsterdam. So I always really connected with my mom's family because everybody was really off the boat. It was very much of a family is everything childhood, and I was just immersed kind of in that Italian American culture, and I kind of was always wondering what my dad was. And it's hard to kind of look back on my childhood and realize I was always kind of asking questions about that. But because my dad's family had been in this country for so long, there really wasn't a lot of information. He'd just be like, I don't know, something about you know my last name is an English name, so English or Dutch. My grandmother knew something about Dutch, but there was really no information, and so I really was always kind of looking for that kind of cultural connection on that side. So when I got old enough, I actually started doing genealogy, and I talked to one of my dad's cousins who had done genealogy and started kind of looking really on both sides of my family for ways to connect. And with my mom's side, it looked like trips to Italy and connecting with family in Italy and keeping in touch with my family there, especially after my grandparents passed. And on my dad's side, it looked like kind of tracing the family tree back generations, and also trying to find some of his cousins. He didn't really have a big family, so trying to find some more distant cousins of his, who I did end up connecting with. And so there was always kind of a theme of looking for family connection in my childhood. And that was part of what spurred the DNA test, really, was interest in finding out a little bit more, especially about my dad's side, knowing that it was just kind of this hodgepodge of American settlers. So I took the opportunity when I found that 23andMe was doing a research study on depression and bipolar disorder. I'd really had wanted to do these tests for a while, but I was like, poor, out of college, just married, So when I found this test for free, it was absolutely fantastic. And I qualified for it. I had a history of depression, as did my dad. So, figuring it was genetic. Turns out my biological father as well, but that's later. So I did this test, and I did this 23andMe test, spit in the tube, and sent it off. And in September of 2017, I got my results. I was laying in bed, about to go to sleep, checking my email one more time, and I got the email from 23andMe. And when I opened up the email, the first thing that popped out on my pie chart was that I was, 49% Ashkenazi Jewish. So that was unexpected. That was nowhere in what I knew about my family. Immediately, my first thought being, maybe my Italian grandparents were Jewish. My grandfather, when they immigrated here, they lived in Brooklyn, and there was a lot of camaraderie between the Italian and Jewish immigrants there. And people often mistook my grandfather for a Jewish man, and, whatever. I'm trying to make sense of this. So I'm trying to figure out if maybe my mother's side was really ethnically Jewish, and I'm sending screenshots to friends and trying to figure this out. And really, it took me several hours and conversations with friends to realize that that's not what the situation was at all. I was not, I was pulling at strings, trying to say my dad had a grandmother who had a German last name. Maybe she was really German Jewish, and trying to put all these pieces together to add up to 50%. And as we all kind of know now, if you end up as 50% something, it's probably that one of your parents is 100% something,
Mm-hmm.
So, about 4:00 in the morning, one of my friends said to me, she's like, Cassandra, she's like, you have an English last name. She's like, your dad has significant British ancestry. You're 0% British. And I was like, that's when it really hit me that I was looking at 50% Jewish, and the other half was really all, it was a mix of Italian and Middle East, and a little bit of, scatterings around Europe, but it was consistent with 50% Italian. And that's when it really hit me that I was looking at 50-50, and that something was very, very wrong with my story. And my friend suggested I look at my matches, which I had done, but I had a half sister match, and that just didn't make sense. Maybe it was my dad had a kid prior to us, and but she was also 50% Jewish. And so the questions really started compounding at that point. And I sent my mom a message to please come over. She was coming over that morning to watch my daughter while I had an appointment. And so I asked her if she could come over a little earlier, and so that we could talk about this. So that was the leading up to the moment of discovery. I think as soon as the customer service line opened up at 23andMe, I called also to ask if there was any chance that the test had been, mixed up or anything like that. And the woman assured me that they have so many safeguards in place that that was not possible. That was my test. And I said, I don't know. It would almost seem like my father's not my father. And that just doesn't make sense. I know he is, and so I had to speak with my mom in order to find the truth of what was going on.
My gosh, how shocking. I can't even imagine looking at DNA matches and seeing nearly 50% Ashkenazi Jewish.
Yes.
I think okay. So you're like 50% Jewish, 50% Italian, approximately, with other stuff
Yes.
mixed in.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did
they've since revised it. Now it's at 50%,
Okay. Oh my gosh. So, so how did it go speaking with your mom?
So my mom knew what was coming. First of all, she had actually watched me spit into the tube, and as I recall, kind of had a sick look on her face. But she wears her feelings on her face anyway, so I didn't really think anything of it at the time. And then as soon as I got my results, when I was still in the phase of thinking that perhaps my Italian grandparents were Jewish, I messaged her in my excitement of discovery and shock to say that maybe she should take the test too, because she might therefore show some Jewish. And she just kind of sent me the little thumbs up sign, because I think she realized what had happened and what was going on. So when she came over in the morning, she was well aware of what was about to happen, and she sat down, and I said, so mommy, what's going on? And I said, he's not my father, is he? And she started crying, and I said, what happened? What's going on? Why didn't you tell me? Just so many questions, all the questions that kind of start to come into your mind. And she said that, Daddy couldn't have children. So we used a donor. And that's the moment where, because it was actually confirmed, it was actually said out loud, the story was cemented, and that is the moment where everything really crumbles, and you realize that half of who you are is a complete secret. I looked over at my daughter. My daughter was 19 months old when I found out, and she was playing in the corner of the room when my mom said that. And I looked over at my daughter, and immediately I was like, what did I pass down to her? Just, completely sick feeling. And I worked in healthcare before I had my daughter, and immediately started thinking of what on earth was in my body, and what predispositions I didn't know I had. I was about to turn 35, and really that was one of the first things I said to my mom was, okay, this man is Jewish. The cancers that run in certain Ashkenazi families, the BRCA gene, the ovarian cancers, Tay-Sachs. That was one of the first things I said to my mom was, like, how could you not tell me? I'm 35 years old. This man all his sisters could have died of breast cancer at 35. And here I am, not knowing that I have a risk factor. I could have been having mammograms for the last 5 years if I was at risk. How could you put me at risk like this?
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't mad yet at that point. It was more like a shock and a frustration and a disbelief at how she could know this information about me, and not disclose it to me. Um, and so I started to question her about, who it was or who knew. And it turned out it was purely a secret between her and my dad. I use the word dad for the man who raised me. Um, so it was purely between her and my dad. None of my grandparents knew. Neither my mother's parents, who were biological to me, or my paternal grandparents, who were not biological to me. None of them knew. No family, no friends, just the two of them and the doctor, with this huge secret for 35 years. And so I also started to feel really sad for her at that point, because I could see, as soon as she told me, the weight was like, there was a visible weight kind of lifted off of her, even though she was hysterically crying. I could see the weight of like, oh, I've told her. And so I felt really sad, like, that, why did you feel like you had to keep this in for so long? Um, and it was just such a mess of feelings in that moment. And there were, one of the things that she said to me in that moment, and this whole conversation was, in the span of maybe 15 minutes before I had to leave and go to my appointment. One of the things she said to me, kind of through her tears, was that she always thought I was Jewish. And you have to understand, I was conceived and born in 1982. And at that time, and in my circumstance, sperm donation was seriously like an underground, like, it almost strikes me as like an illegal ring. I think one of my half brothers called the lead doctor like the dealer. It was extremely secretive. It was not, there were no records kept. There was apparently nothing written on my mother's chart that this had occurred. She received no paperwork that anything had happened. No, nothing. So the doctors chose the donors from their buddies. There was no choice. The parents had no choice. So people who are using donors now may think this, but this is how things operated, until the 90s, really. And so my mom and my dad had absolutely no idea what my other half was. No idea who, no idea what ethnicity or anything. So when my mom kind of told me that she suspected for 35 years that I was Jewish, it was a very big shock. And it's been one of the kind of most troubling things about this for me, because one of the biggest points of my discovery has been finding this other ethnic half of me. And I use the term that I've learned from the adoptee community, which is trans-ethnic. It's similar to transracial, which people know. Transracial adoptees are, raised in a different by a family of a different race than they are. And trans-ethnic is when your racial characteristics kind of fit in with the family that you're in, but truthfully, you belong to a culture that's very, very different. And so I have felt very passionate about the right to culture and to ethnicity, and to know those things about ourselves. So to me, having learned so much in the last 3 years about Judaism, about the Jewish experience in America, about anti-Semitism, reflecting back on my mother's words is extremely troubling to me, because while I know my family, especially my grandfather, my Italian grandfather, loved Jewish people, while I know that there was that esteem there, I felt stereotyped. I felt judged. I felt like, what is it about me that stands out to you as Jew in that moment? And it feels like a singling out. It feels like you've got this target on you somehow of being different, or being stereotypical, being a way that's obvious that other people can tell what you are. And to have that from my own mother is extremely uh, disturbing,
Yeah.
extremely. It broke down a lot of trust there from someone who was my best friend, consistently for the first 35 years of my life, to know that there had been so much kind of behind the scenes judgment of me or guessing about me, so many things that they knew about me that I didn't know about myself, that really dehumanizing. So a lot of my respect was lost for my parents in that. But the other thing that my mother brought up during this short discussion when I found out was that um, her doctor, one of the days that she was inseminated, had told her that he had just driven in from Long Island with this sperm sample. So my parents were in Westchester County, New York, which is um, right shares a border with New York City. And so that was really the only thing I had to go on was, okay, Long Island and possible doctor, because she said they said they were using doctors and medical students, which a lot of people were told in that day and age, but it turned out to oftentimes not be true. But in my case, it was true. It was a friend, one of the doctor friends of my mother's doctor. Um, so I was able to put all the pieces together. I looked at my half sibling match later that day and Googled her last name and found several doctors on Long Island with that last name. So yeah, I was able to um, find him very easily because I messaged my half sister and kind of approached her with the understanding that it was probably her dad who had donated his sperm. And she was able to confirm that. And from there, I was able to get a little more information, and eventually be in contact with my biological father.
Wow. So the half sibling that took the 23andMe, the half sister that took the 23andMe test,
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't um
She was not donor conceived.
not
No,
donor
she was
conceived. Okay.
right. She was his natural daughter from marriage.
Natural daughter. Got it.
Yes,
Wow.
or raised daughter is a term we'll use too. Like
Okay.
she, raised by him. Yeah.
And so you found out your biological you found your biological dad pretty, I mean, how long did that take you? A couple days?
Yeah. Once I got the courage to message her, it was, like 48 hours after I got the results. And once I kind of was put in contact and kind of back and forth within 2 to 3 days, I had an idea who he was. It was still a couple months before I started emailing with him directly. I talked to his son first. He gave me some medical information, and I met him actually. So just to kind of, I think it's a new experience for everybody, and nobody's really quite sure how to approach it. And I think everybody wants to like be comfortable with each other, or, because you're a stranger on a screen. You share a certain percentage DNA, but you don't know one another yet. And yeah, so we took that slowly a little bit, and then I was able to yeah, within a couple months I was in contact with my biological father.
How I have so many questions. Okay. Um, which one do I start with? How many half siblings do you think you have?
Oh, we have absolutely no idea, and that's one of the things that kills me. It's very, very hard to know. He doesn't quite remember. So far, there is 2.5 years between my oldest sibling and myself, um, who's the youngest of the donor conceived um, uh, offspring or children or
Hmm.
whatever word is the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's 2.5 years at least of donations in there.
Oh no.
Um, yeah. And that, at the time they were doing fresh donations, as opposed to frozen, which became more popular as the 80s went on because of the AIDS epidemic. There were several women I know in Canada, and at least I probably in the US as well, who contracted HIV from donor insemination because they were using fresh samples. So it wasn't until the mid 80s when it became more commonplace to freeze sperm in order to quarantine it too, to make sure that the donor was not HIV positive. But that also kind of led to the rise of bigger sperm banks where they could store the sperm and kind of create what it is now, which is you've got catalogs and you can go through the different donors that are available and choose who you want. So, but yeah, at the time it was just give a sample and it was used.
Oh
I
my
forget
gosh.
I forget the initial question.
No, that was I
Oh, how many? Yes,
how
how many?
many?
That's right. So yeah, so far there are four of us, and then the donor has three children that he raised. So it's it's a lot, and we don't know how many. I mean, there are some sibling groups that are 20, 50. I mean, once you get into freezing the sperm, there are sibling groups with hundreds. There's even a doctor, I believe, in the UK who, theorized that he might have 1,000. And this was before freezing. This was just a doctor who donated a sperm for decades. Um,
Oh my gosh.
so we have no idea. I'm guessing probably at least a couple dozen. And the only way to find them is if they DNA test.
And
So.
just think of how many people never, I mean, just in my own life that never take a 23andMe or an ancestry, never spit in the tube and take a DNA test. You would never know.
You would
And
never know. No. And
yeah.
some people are even some older donor conceived people from the generation prior to my generation. Um, I'm getting older too. I shouldn't say older, but
You are not.
uh, but they're finding out because their children are taking DNA tests and finding out.
Oh.
So these are the grandchildren of donors who are now, in their 20s or 30s and taking DNA tests because, it's a misconception that this is a new technology. This is not a new technology, and it was not insanely expensive decades ago. You know,
Yeah.
like it is now. Uh, my mom paid $100 per insemination,
Really?
which was, I mean, not that that's pocket change, even in 1982, or even now, really. But now people spend thousands and thousands of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
per vial.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not a pricey thing. It was, and so people were doing it, especially since after World War II. It was pioneered, I believe, in like the 1880s as a kind of experimental thing. They actually knocked the woman out and didn't tell her that they inseminated her with someone else's sperm. And
Wow.
yeah, she didn't know. And it was written about, and it was not ethical at all. And as the 20th century went on, practices really kind of didn't really advance much. It was usually either the doctor himself, which we call like fertility fraud is what they're calling it now.
Yeah.
And or it was the doctor using other doctors, or people in the clinic. Sometimes it was a janitor, or who knows. But there was a lot of just secrecy, very shady. Also, there were men who were going in for to have their own children and giving sperm samples to be used either for analysis to look at their own sperm counts, or to be used on their wives. And some of those sperm samples were stolen and used on other women. So those men were unwilling donors. And these kind of stories sound really out there, but when you're involved in a community of donor conceived people, even if it's just a few thousand people, like, these are really unfortunately common stories that shadiness went down. And I wish we could say that everything is kind of resolved now, but it isn't in a lot of ways. Like, there are things that are better, but there are things that have gotten more complex ethically because it's become such a big industry. So it's a very complicated history. And there's been such a shift from secrecy, because decades ago it was primarily heterosexual couples who were infertile. And now a big percentage of those who use donors or especially sperm donors, are lesbian couples or single women who'd like to conceive and be mothers. And for those groups, it's a lot more difficult to keep this secret. And although some have tried, believe me, there are people who were raised by single women who were told a different story and didn't learn until later that it was a donor, or who knows. It's crazy, but we really have the lesbian community to thank for kind of opening up the blinds and not allowing secrecy. It just kind of became more and more common to tell the kids their story, and not as kind of a shameful feeling in society around the idea of sperm donors or needing to use one. So that's been a huge thing for the community, is having more visibility, less shame, and also, talking more, especially about male infertility. That was a huge issue for my family, and also for so many other families, especially those that kept secrets, was not wanting to disclose or tell anyone that a man was infertile. And the problem there is so much that the man is not able to ever really truthfully deal with his feelings around infertility, because it's never discussed. It's donor conception was, and truthfully still is today, used as really like a Band-Aid for infertility. Using a donor doesn't cure infertility at all. It's having a baby with another person who is fertile, really and truthfully. So a lot of times parents don't really fully deal with their own feelings around infertility, whether it's the infertile partner themselves or whether it's their partner who's also grieving the idea of having a child with the person that they love. And so that's a big issue and a big concern and a big thing that we're trying to push with the mental health community as well. Psychologists who deal with infertility to make sure that they oh, here we go, we got the music playing.
There it is again, your awesome clock.
Santa Claus is coming.
Your Christmas clock, I love it.
Yes. So I'll wait till that's finished. But of course this is the longest song.
No, that's fine. Well, it's totally fine if it's in there. It happens. But no, what you're saying is something I hadn't thought about. It's like the men, because they're having their own issues with their infertility or their low sperm count or whatever, their own shame about that, they'll be willing to hide their future child's half their parentage.
Yes. And it becomes what we like. Yes, exactly. And that's what we refer to it as, like passing down the pain. Mm-hmm. And in kind of with the typical kind of NPE experience, if there was an affair, it might be a similar analogy to the mother's infidelity secret, where she never dealt with the shame around the infidelity. And so it's now the child's job to deal with, taking care of everybody's feelings around that. And for us, it's a little bit of the opposite, where it's, assuming it's a different father, which is more common, we're tiptoeing around the feelings that were never dealt with around infertility, and around raising someone else's child, or any of that, because they're not, if it's a secret, they're not able to deal with any of the issues that would come up for donor conceived people. There's no, any concerns about bonding, any concerns about attachment, anything is not dealt with. And so then it becomes our burden to deal with it all. And it's very, very tricky, and it ends up putting a lot of stress on the family as well, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy. Secrecy is not healthy. It's
Never
not healthy. And I think what kind of sets us apart in some ways from some of the other NPE communities is the feeling that this was done to us on purpose. Whereas with so many cases, perhaps it was an affair, a one-night stand, and maybe the intention was not to get pregnant by this other person. And then when it happened, well, then you have to cover for it. With us, it was like a premeditated plan to put this all into motion. And it's so hurtful. It's so hard to wrap your mind around that, especially when it's your parents, because they're like the first attachment that you form. Mm-hmm. And to have that attachment broken is excruciating. It affects all of your relationships, because you're destroying the foundation of your trust, the foundation of your ability to see the world accurately, and you're just completely destroying it. And when you destroy that, it destroys your ability to connect with anyone. You've had something ripped from you, and it's because it's kind of both your parents kind of conspiring, and it's very difficult, and they each have their own place within the lie. There are some times where I felt more empathy with my dad for what he went through, and for feeling the way he did, and felt more like it was my mother, who kind of did more of the lying. And other times I feel more mad at him for not dealing with his feelings, and for, in my personal case, he's a very angry person and took out a lot of his anger and frustration with the secret coming out on me. So yeah, it's a very complicated world, and it adds some different complications than some other NPE stories do.
It it really does. I'm learning so much more now about the children's rights and the ethical nature and how there's no regulation, and I'm just learning a lot, and you're explaining it so well. But
Oh,
I did want to ask about, well, I have so many questions, but you did just mention your dad and how he treated you and his blame, he mistreated you, really. Is that
okay.
something that you wanted to get into today, or would you prefer to skip over it? Because it's
It's hard. I mean, I'll give what, I was able to talk to my dad one time about this, and probably the only time I'll ever really discuss it with him. I wanted to make sure that he knew how much I loved him and how much he would be my only daddy. Nobody else is daddy. Nobody else is the man. I'm still, when I found this out, I wanted a hug from my dad. I wanted a hug to tell me, that he still loved me. And I never got that hug, because even the hugs that we've had since then, or the hug after we spoke, was not the kind of hug that I needed. It was not the, oh my God, I still love you, you're still my daughter. Um, his mantra when we spoke was, it wasn't a lie because you weren't supposed to find out.
oh,
That was the mantra. And just kept telling himself that, and telling me that, and asking me why I had to think about being Jewish every day. He didn't think about being Dutch every day, so why did I have to think about being Jewish every day? So, well, I've only known for a few months, so at that point, and it's very complicated, and it made me feel even more adamant that he had literally never dealt with any of his feelings. He showed me so little empathy for being his daughter. Like, literally, his daughter was sitting right in front of him. His daughter, in like every way except biologically, was sitting right there in front of him. And he could muster up so little empathy for how hard this was for me. Whereas I was asking him about his struggle and trying to empathize, and really the only emotion he showed was for his own grief. And I even apologized to him. I apologized to him for not being able to be a person in whom he could see his own face reflected. So here I am, the child in the relationship, apologizing, someone who accidentally found out this decades long secret, apologizing and protecting the feelings of my dad. And the more we do that, the longer I think it takes for us to work on ourselves, and to heal ourselves, because we're the ones who are so deeply, deeply hurt, by this, by, especially in my case, by people who did it intentionally to me, under not the best advice. I don't blame them for not telling me, as a small child. Now we recommend even talking to your baby bump and telling, because really the more you tell the story, the less emotional it gets. So if you start talking even before your baby's born, like, your baby will always know the story and always be comfortable, and you'll be comfortable telling it. So I don't blame my parents for not doing that. I you know I blame them for, once it became important, once I started to grow up, knowing the time period that they were from. My dad even mentioned that had they adopted a child, they probably would have told the child around like 12 or so. And so that blew my mind, because it was just different expectations for me that I would never be told, even though it was virtually half adopted. So, that to me was what bothered me. Empathizing with them for the time period they lived in, while also realizing that, they had many chances, and my mother knew it was, she knew. She really felt guilty for 35 years, and it showed.
Mm.
And when I look back on her and her personality and stuff, I realize how damaged she became, and how damaged both my parents became, just holding on to the secret, between the two of them, and how much it was really, learning the terms and kind of the experience is really like a trauma bond between them, because they were not like, it was very disturbing to find that out, that this is really kind of what held them together and held their marriage together and held the family together, was like the secret.
And they
it
made it this sick, shameful secret, and it never had to be.
Right. And now that burden is on me,
Yes.
to sort out that shame about who I am, about my own life, and to kind of, it's already such a strange experience, because it feels very much, because there, and I think this is so hard for some people to understand, but it's an exchange of money for your identity.
Mm.
My mom paid the doctor $100. He gave my biological father $35. And for that small amount of money, my entire identity was just erased. Half of my lineage, half of who I was, just changed. And that is the most bizarre thing to wrap your mind around, for such a, and especially for those of us who are from that generation where it was a small amount of money like that, where you're thinking, my goodness, $35. Like, I lost my cultural and religious identity for $35. Like this was done to me on purpose, and it just blows my mind. It was an emotion I don't know that it's possible to like convey, and it's so violating. It's just so violating.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I bet there's so many people that can't wrap their head around or empathize or understand, no matter how hard they try.
No.
As an NPE, I can get it to a point. I can listen to you and I'm nodding along, and there's still so much I haven't, especially this fact that the parents, their very first choice, I said that wrong. The very first decision they make as a parent is one of a self-centered choice. What do they want, not what is in the best interest of this child.
Right. Exactly.
And that is setting up for a lifetime of decisions that are not in the child's best interests.
Exactly. There's so many times, like, you have these flashbacks as you go through the experience of things that happened earlier in your life, and kind of these memories coming back to me of times sitting in a doctor's office and my parents lying and as the years have gone by, I've kind of had those return and had to deal with them and deal with the grief, bit by bit, deal with each memory kind of as it comes. I mean, I even had these kind of vivid flashbacks to my own mother being inseminated, even though that wasn't me. But I had this like really sick, violated feeling, and it was hard for me to go to the doctor. It was like it's one of the big reasons why I probably am not going to have another child. I loved being pregnant. I loved my pregnancy. I love being a mom. And yet some of that magic, like even my doctor would always be like, I love it when you come in, you're so excited about this. You're so like, you love being pregnant. Other people are all like upset about it. Like, not saying my pregnancy was perfect or anything, but yeah, even the hardships were beautiful to me because of the result, but like, it took that beauty away. And it took you know what else it took away from me was, and I think maybe other NPEs can feel this too, that feeling of, especially because I found out as a new mother, and that feeling of absolute love that you have when you have a child. And for me, some of that was taken away. I looked to that feeling sometimes when I was feeling bad about myself. You look to that feeling of well, your parents love you, even if you feel like no one else does in this world, or my parents care. And it really, I started thinking about the worries that my mom must have had, like being pregnant with a stranger's child, having no idea who it was, no idea what this child would look like, if it would be obvious. I mean, there are all kinds of stories of sperm mix-ups and the child comes out biracial and everybody's, the cover is blown and and I'm starting to, I was thinking of all these possibilities that would have run through my mom's head, just not knowing anything about this person, and almost like wondering about me or suspicious of me. I don't know. I just, all these feelings that I had just turned me off so much to feeling connected to the idea of motherhood. And so this experience just has so many like much farther reaching consequences to the rest of our lives than people might think. The health information again was huge for me, and once I found that out, it was a big blessing to be able to give a doctor the correct health information for the first time. And my mother swore up and down that they never lied to the doctors when they did, and when there were times that my medical treatment was based on conditions that my dad had, or conditions, or
Yeah.
the treatment that worked for my dad. There were a couple specific incidences that I, know throughout my life where my dad's medical history played a big part in how I was treated or what I was tested for. And there was one case where it actually made a big difference. And I truthfully could have lost my life, um, but I was told, no, we never lied about your medical history. So that wipes it all clean. I shouldn't be upset, right?
The very fact that your parents never told anyone, I think says a lot about them. And I'm gonna guess your father might be a keeper I mean, both of them are secret keepers, but I'm just picking up on the fact that your father is really, really for this secret. But how they couldn't even tell their own parents or best friends or siblings just shows. I feel like everyone has a secret, but they usually tell someone in their life, maybe a couple. Very
Right.
wow. Okay.
And that's one of the biggest griefs I have is for my grandparents too. Quite frankly, all six of them, because my biological paternal grandparents, who I will never know, they've passed away.
Yeah.
My dad's parents, who will never know that I was not related to them, and that kills me. I feel so bad. I just feel so bad for them. I feel so bad. And my mom's parents, I feel bad in a different way, even though we are still biologically connected. My mom and her mom were inseparable, best friends, told each other everything. I mean, talked on the phone every day. They knew what they each ate for every meal. They knew each other's bathroom habits. I mean, everything.
Yes.
Everything.
Oh.
And that was similar to the relationship I had with my mom as well. And the grief and the disgust I have, and after this came out, I found there were some other family secrets, not from my parents, but elsewhere in the immediate family. And I just felt completely disgusted and betrayed on behalf of my grandparents as well, because I could not imagine telling I mean, I still feel bad the time I lied to my parents when I was 12 and rode my bike. Instead of riding my bike with my girlfriend, I went to the playground with a boy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is like the biggest lie of my life that I've told my parents.
Yeah.
And I can, and I could not imagine how how you could live with yourself for lying to your parents,
No.
even about such a big thing. And it
No.
just, I spent so many days crying over all these things, over grieving over siblings I'll never meet, grieving over siblings who may not be alive anymore, grieving over my grandparents, just everything. Everything takes like months. Every aspect of this takes months to process and deal with. So you're talking about this, the recovery from this is just lifelong in a sense. You're always remembering new things of why this new truth makes sense. You're always remembering events from your childhood that kind of shed light on the truth, because even, for me, where this was unexpected, to a large extent. I remember people saying early on, like, oh yeah, now that I think about it, it makes sense. It makes sense. And I thought, no, I was really shocked. It didn't make sense. But that was, within the first few weeks. But now 3 years out, I mean, there are so many things that make so much more sense, and so many things where I recognize what happened earlier in my life, feelings I had, feeling very isolated, very disconnected, very strange, very wrong, very much like I shouldn't be alive somehow, and connecting it to some of this, and meeting my biological father and learning a little bit more about that side of me, and realizing how much of myself comes from this man and from his genes, how much of my appearance, how much of my personality, how much of my heart, really. I it's hard to explain, but when you meet somebody who is that closely related to you, there is almost like an understanding of each other's thoughts, and understanding of each other's thought processes too, and just of imagining their emotions, and you just have this like secure sense that you understand, and that they understand you, and it's very much like meeting yourself, and gaining so much understanding of why you are the way you are. And to me, that's understanding that everybody should have access to, that no matter who your family of origin is, that everyone should be able to have access um, to their other biological parent or parents, in the case of double donors or embryo donors, to know who they are. We've learned from adoptees. We know this has been going on for so long with adoptees, and they've done so much hard work toward the right to identity. And when we pointed out in the United Nations have even set forth their guide for children's rights. One of them is to identity, and to know who you are, to know your parents, to know your families. And you can, there's so many different beautiful family structures in this world, so many non-traditional families. And like what we're realizing is that like the less traditional, the better. Anybody, you can live with any group of family, and then but knowing and having access to other parts of your family tree is just so key for building a sense of who we are and why we are the way we are. Yeah.
Cassandra, I'm going to have so many more questions. And so at this point, because I have another appointment in a couple minutes, I'm going to wrap it up. But I know people are going to have questions for you as well. So can they get in touch with you? And if so, how?
Yes, I am on Facebook. My name is Cassandra Adams. You can search for me, and you can send me a message and friend request and explain who you are. I'm also on Instagram, Cassandra J. Adams, and Twitter as well with that same handle. You can request to follow and kind of follow along. I'm public with a lot of my journey. and welcome, especially anyone who, I'm kind of a magnet on the internet for anybody who finds out that they're Jewish. So that's become one of my specialties as well, is that area of finding identity. So any surprises of that nature, please feel free to reach out to me, or also Cassandra J. Adams at yahoo.com is my email. And I am available. I'm always willing to listen if anybody is hurting. I don't want anybody to feel like they're alone in this, because we all feel that way too much as it is, even when we have the community surrounding us.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. I really appreciate this. This was eye-opening today.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Cassandra for sharing today. These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.